Welcome to our journey into animal diversity. Today, we are going to explore one of the most dramatic and challenging events in the entire history of our planet, the great transition of life from water to land. We will discover the incredible engineering and mathematical principles that made this survival possible. To truly appreciate this topic, let us first imagine spending your entire life floating in a warm, supportive swimming pool. You never hold your own weight, and you breathe effortlessly. Now, imagine being suddenly tossed onto dry, hot concrete. Instantly, gravity pulls you down, making you feel incredibly heavy. The dry air begins to suck the moisture right out of your skin. Your gills, which worked perfectly in the water, collapse and stick together, leaving you gasping for breath. This terrifying scenario is exactly what the first aquatic animals faced millions of years ago. Now that we understand the terrifying challenges of leaving the water, let us formally define how animals survived. Terrestrial adaptations are the specific modifications that allow an organism to thrive in a non-aquatic environment. Morphologically, animals developed sturdy, bony tetrapod skeletons and strong limbs to fight the constant downward pull of gravity. Physiologically, they evolved internal lungs to extract oxygen from the air and thick, keratinized skin to prevent fatal water loss. Reproductively, the amniotic egg allowed animals to package a tiny, private pond for their embryos, freeing them from the water entirely. You might be wondering why we study these ancient evolutionary changes today. Understanding these adaptations is absolutely crucial because it explains the very existence of almost all the animals you interact with daily, including yourself. Without these breakthroughs, the continents would be barren. Furthermore, by studying how animals solved problems of gravity and desiccation, engineers have learned incredible lessons about biomechanics. For example, reptile skin has inspired synthetic waterproof materials used in modern medicine. Finally, understanding these fragile adaptations helps conservationists protect modern amphibians from climate change. Of all the challenges we just discussed, perhaps the most urgent was figuring out how to breathe. When animals moved to land, they had to extract oxygen from air instead of water. While air actually contains much more oxygen than water, there is a major catch. Respiratory surfaces must be kept moist for gases to dissolve. Exposing moist gills to dry air causes them to dry out and fail. To solve this, animals evolved internal lungs, which are essentially highly folded bags tucked safely inside the moist environment of the body. This evolutionary shift to internal lungs leads us to an important question. How do we measure breathing efficiency? The answer lies in Fick's law of diffusion, which mathematically describes how quickly oxygen moves across a biological membrane. Let us break down this beautiful equation. The variable R represents the rate of diffusion, meaning how much oxygen enters the blood per second. The symbol K is the diffusion constant, a fixed number depending on the gas. The variable A stands for the surface area of the respiratory membrane. The term P2 minus P1 represents the difference in partial pressure, acting as the driving force. Finally, D represents the thickness of the membrane. Physically, to increase oxygen intake, an animal must maximize its surface area A and minimize the membrane thickness D. Before we move on, let us see this formula in action with a concrete biological example. Imagine we are looking at a primitive amphibian that breathes mostly through its flat skin. We want to calculate its oxygen diffusion rate. We are given that its simple skin surface area is 0.1 square meters. To keep the math clean, we will assume the diffusion constant, pressure difference, and membrane thickness all combine to form a constant multiplier of 50. We substitute the surface area into our simplified Fick's law equation. Multiplying 50 by 0.1 gives us a final rate of 5.0 units of oxygen per second. This relatively low number explains why amphibians are generally small and cannot sustain high activity. Now, let us compare that primitive amphibian to a more advanced reptile. This reptile breathes using highly folded internal lungs. Because the lungs are folded inside the body, the reptile packs a massive internal surface area of 3.0 square meters into a small volume. We use the exact same constant multiplier of 50, assuming all other environmental conditions are identical. We substitute the reptile's surface area of 3.0 into the equation. Multiplying 50 by 3.0 gives us 150 units of oxygen per second. This is 30 times greater than the amphibian. This massive mathematical increase in oxygen delivery allows reptiles and mammals to grow to enormous sizes and run fast. To truly grasp why the reptile's diffusion rate is so much higher, let us look at this visually. On the left, you see a simple internal lung cavity with low surface area, similar to early terrestrial animals. The blue arrows represent oxygen slowly diffusing across the smooth walls. Now, look at the right side. This represents a highly evolved lung. Notice how the internal tissue branches and folds into millions of tiny sacs called alveoli. By folding the tissue inward, the animal dramatically increases the surface area variable, A, from Fick's law, without increasing the overall size of the lung. This brilliant biological engineering maximizes gas exchange while keeping the delicate tissues safely moist inside the body. While breathing air was a massive hurdle, it was not the only one. This brings us to another deadly threat: desiccation, or drying out. The rate at which an animal loses water to the dry air is directly related to its physical dimensions. Specifically, it depends on the ratio between its surface area and its internal volume. Small animals have a very high surface area relative to their tiny internal volume, meaning they lose water incredibly fast. This is why small amphibians must stay near ponds and damp environments, while large reptiles have the capacity to roam the arid desert. To understand exactly why small animals dry out faster, we rely on a beautiful mathematical relationship known as the surface area to volume ratio. The simplified formula is elegantly straightforward. The ratio equals 3 divided by r. In this equation, the word ratio represents how much skin is exposed to the air compared to the amount of water stored inside the body. The variable r represents the physical size or radius of the creature. What this formula tells us physically is that the ratio is inversely proportional to the radius. As the radius r increases, meaning the animal gets larger, the overall ratio decreases dramatically. This protects larger animals from rapid evaporation. Let us apply this ratio formula to a real-world scenario, starting with a tiny amphibian. We will model a small frog as a sphere with a radius of exactly 1 centimeter. We want to find its surface area to volume ratio to understand its risk of drying out. We take our simplified formula, where the ratio equals 3 divided by r. We substitute the frog's radius, which is 1, into the denominator. 3 divided by 1 gives us a final ratio of 3.0. This is a very high number. Physically, it means the frog has a massive amount of skin exposed to the dry air compared to the tiny drop of water stored inside its body. If it stays in the sun, it will die quickly. Now, let us see what happens when an animal evolves to be much larger. We will model a large reptile with a radius of 10 centimeters. We want to calculate its ratio to see how its size protects it. We use the exact same formula, 3 divided by r. This time, we substitute the reptile's radius of 10 into the denominator. 3 divided by 10 gives us a final ratio of 0.3. Notice how small this number is compared to the frog. Because the reptile is larger, it has significantly less exposed skin relative to its massive internal water reserves. This mathematical reality is a key reason why increasing body size was a major evolutionary adaptation for conquering land. Now that we have used this simplified formula to understand survival, let us prove exactly where it comes from. We start by modeling our animal as a perfect sphere. The surface area of a sphere, which represents the skin, is given by the formula 4 times pi times r squared. The internal volume, representing the water reserves, is 4/3 times pi times r cubed. To find the rate of water loss, we divide the surface area A by the volume V. When we set up this fraction, the 4 and the pi in the numerator and denominator cancel each other out. The r squared on top cancels with 2 of the r's on the bottom, leaving a single r in the denominator. The fraction 1 over 1/3 simplifies to 3. This leaves us with our final elegant result. The ratio equals 3 divided by r. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. Let us bring it all together. The transition to land required animals to completely redesign their bodies to fight gravity, extract oxygen from dry air, and prevent their internal water from evaporating. We saw through Fick's law that evolving highly folded internal lungs maximized the surface area needed for efficient breathing. Finally, we proved that increasing body size lowers the surface area to volume ratio, protecting animals from fatal desiccation. You now have a profound mathematical appreciation for the incredible resilience of terrestrial life.